enter. Okay. Basically, Mark, what race are you racing this year?
I'm looking at Moab Rocks and then Pikes Peak Apex.
Nice. Okay. So yeah, two kind of big races and stuff. So visualization and then utilizing cross training is what we're going to kind of go into. And so basically, the topics that we're going to really discuss is going to be mental rehearsal, goal setting, then sports training, like how we use visualization within sports training, and then as well relaxation. And then we'll spend a little bit of time of like applying like into cross training. So basically, how to apply cross training into our programs, especially as we go through the winter months. Because Mark, where are you located?
I'm in Northeast Oregon.
Northeast Oregon. Okay, yeah. So you kind of can ride a lot of the year and stuff. So that's great. But nonetheless, so mental rehearsal. Basically, it's imagine yourself completing a task or goal to practice, accomplishing it. So obviously a very broad statement, but you're going to want to take those, the Moab and the Pikes Peak race, and you're going to want to kind of think about how do I want to apply, like, what do I want out of those races? And then we kind of get an opportunity to utilize, and all these other next steps that we're kind of coming into. We start applying it, whether it's in sport related, in the relaxation part of it, in the goal setting. The visualization component is probably one of the most underutilized things that a lot of athletes, I think, get into like by not doing. When we are, picking our goals, like we don't just kind of grab them out of midair. It's kind of something that it's worth having that like bigger thought and having that like introspection and reflection to actually like visualize what you want to have happen and what you want to come. Um, so that's kind of again when we talk about as we are goal setting and stuff, we do need to have a bit of that actual bigger thought. Um, as we come into goal setting, um, obviously it's kind of that time of year where it is important to get to actually figuring them out. Like what are the goals that you have? What do you want? What do you want out of the races that you're doing? So probably the big one that I see a lot within my own company is am I kind of looking to thrive in this race? And is thriving, winning your age group, is thriving a feeling at the end of the finish line? Is it, winning the race overall? Like there's so many different levels of what that is. But probably the biggest takeaway to goal setting, I would say, is like kind of really imagining the emotion that you'd feel when you achieve your goal. And we kind of really dive into it deeper in kind of the next slide where we really talk about how we relate that to our training. Because when you have this goal of like how you want to feel when you finish and, where do you want to be placed or what, you might have some outcome goals of like what percentage of the race do you want to be in? um, you know, these are all things that kind of play into that. And then the biggest thing with the visualization component is that you can take what you get with that, kind of imagining the emotional side of it. And it allows you to kind of have that be the thing that you take action every day with it. So that's when it's raining 5 degrees, or well, in your case, if we, I don't know, call it like it's 40 out, or maybe that's a little too cold, like 50 out. for the US folks. That might be something where you're like, I really need to draw into what I want out of that emotional experience at the finish line to get me out the door to do it. Because I can't tell you how many times my own racing career that needed to happen and stuff. So yeah. So yeah, we'll go to the next one. So yeah. So this is probably the slide we'll spend a large chunk of time on. The sport training side of it. So what we mean by this is this is the while you're training. How do you want to feel during that race? And so you can take key training sessions, whether that's a threshold session, whether that's a session that's really long, that's going to challenge you in terms of the endurance component. These are opportunities to visualize yourself within a race setting. So if you're really struggling, you got one more interval left. That's an opportunity where you're going to maybe sit on that last interval where you're going to visualize that it's like, oh, I've got a competitor that I've been racing with all week, and I've got a chance to kind of keep them at bay, or maybe they're making up time on you, and it's like I've got to get to the finish line. So these are opportunities to take what we do in training, and you can kind of add some spice to it by taking those visualizations of what you want in the race. And probably one of the biggest takeaways from when you do this correctly, visualizing things in training, is that you're not surprised by much on race day, because you've rehearsed so many different scenarios in your head. Like I used to rehearse if I was leading the race, if I was behind in the race, if I was having a terrible race and needed to make up a ton of time. Like, these are things in my training that I would think about. So it offered me an opportunity when it was actually presented in itself in the actual race. I was able to execute because it wasn't a new sensation. I had already rehearsed it. And again, there's lots of studies that you can find that back this information up. That having a pre-rehearsal, a pre-visualization of different things that will happen, it definitely then on the day that something unfolds, you are so much better equipped to handle it. And so then you can really break it down into sections as well, right? So it doesn't have to just be the like speed part or the competitor part of the race. You can break it down into subcategories of like, a tech section that you're super stressed about. You can start visualizing it. If you've done some of these races prior, like, if you've already been to BC Bike Race or Moab or whatever race, and there was a tech section that particularly was, a little challenging, but somewhat within your grasp to do, you might sit and kind of say to yourself, like, I'm going to start visualizing, that section and how I could have wrote it differently. Believe it or not, like when I ride harder things, it is something that I always think about is, can I visualize myself doing that hard feature? If the answer is yes, well, then I'm likely going to try it. And if the answer is no, then generally I need more time or I need to develop more skill. So it's another opportunity is as you get good at visualizing things, you usually aren't wrong that many times. In the fact that I'm wearing this cast, it shows that sometimes it still goes wrong, even when you've practiced visualizing things a lot, because when it happened, it was a similar thing. I visualized what needed to happen and how I needed to do it. Unfortunately, my execution of that did not go well and didn't work. And then I broke my wrist. So those are things, again, think about it in tech sections. Think about it, are you fearing the start of a race? Like on some of your intervals when you're, first, blasting out, or if you have a really hard VO2 max set, that's an opportunity to utilize that. Again, I'm going to visualize that I've got, 30, 40, 50, 60 racers around me, and it's stressful, and that, kind of ramp that stress in your own head in a training setting. Because again, back to on race day, you'll be so much better prepared. And again, as well, rehearsals too, when it comes to setbacks of things like, how am I going to handle myself if I get a flat tire? Like, it's a great opportunity when you get a flat in racing, or sorry, in training, to kind of rehearse it of like, okay, I'm going to put some pressure on myself to get this done quick. And then, again, we don't always get flat tires. So sometimes you just need to like mentally rehearse if I crashed, how would I mentally like go about getting back on the bike, and what things do I need to do? And same again, when you have a mechanical, like these are things that, before racing, there wasn't much I didn't not think about. I'm thinking about all these different scenarios, and obviously you want to control as many of your controllables. And so visualization is a driver to seeing like, oh, I could actually do this, because you visualized it and you're like, oh, maybe if I had this tool, that would make that that mechanical issue easier. Or if I had this, if I was bonking or whatever, maybe if I had this piece of nutrition, that wouldn't happen. So that's where, again, it's quite a powerful tactic to utilize that visualization component. So yeah. Another really key important one that I don't think it's talked about probably enough in endurance sport is using visualization on the relaxation component of things. So obviously, I find dogs are probably the easiest. They can just do something that's super high energy or whatever, and then they just crash. So a lot of times after super hard sessions, you feel really tired, but sometimes you're maybe mentally really still switched on. And so again, like using things like meditation or breath work and breathing can really help us kind of recenter ourselves and really kind of put us back and kind of turn back on our sympathetic nervous system. So our kind of relax and digest state in terms of our fight or flight system. We want to kind of start shutting that off, because the sooner we can turn that off, the better recovery that we're going to get from that session. So this is kind of this idea of like, how many tools can you add to your toolbox? And, not everyone's a great meditator and stuff like that. Maybe it is just sitting down and reading a book, or maybe it's kind of sitting down and maybe it's knitting, maybe it's tinkering on your bike a bit, or whatever kind of starts to unwind you from, like kind of charging single track, heavy, hard, run sets or bike sets. These are definite areas that can have a pretty drastic effect with that, again, shutting down, relaxing. So you're going to get a deeper sleep, more rest, etc. So yeah, that's relaxation. So that's really the main, I guess, main bit of visualization. So it's not something that's, it's hard to really dive super deep in, especially with, it would have been nice to have a bit of a discussion bit. But of course, again, ruining the meeting time, I've kind of screwed out some people of entering the meeting. So nonetheless, visualization. And again, like, my contact info will be within this recording. So as you have questions on any of the slides prior, just reach out, and we can kind of talk in depth and stuff like that. So the next kind of big topic, because I wanted to kind of pair two of these themes together, as obviously with visualization, like the time of year, we are doing a lot of indoor trainer riding and stuff. It's a great opportunity to do more visualization while you're training, because again, you're not having to ride on single track. or handle a bike, you're stationed on a stationary trainer. So you get a little bit more mental bandwidth to start practicing and kind of having those cues built. But so, my as well philosophy as a coach is generally to do as much activity outside as you can. And you'll see other pro riders. Some are more just, they'll chase the sun. I spent 7 years kind of living in Arizona or going down to Florida when I was more on the East Coast. So I spent a lot of years where I would kind of stay pretty well within my sport on a consistent basis. But granted, most of my professional career, I was a triathlete. So you're a cross training specialist because you're doing 3 sports consistently along with a strength and conditioning program. So it was easy to kind of keep that. But as I transitioned into being like just a straight cyclist, when I kind of pulled back from doing triathlon, it was something that I very quickly, coming from triathlon world, like I would still utilize a lot of my cross training because I just found I had a really hard time doing crazy high mileage only on the bike. And especially, I didn't really get into sport to do it inside. I got into sport because I loved where the sport could take me into the beautiful vistas. Again, I'm fortunate to live in the Sea to Sky corridor and get to enjoy some of the most beautiful forests around. So I will again do everything I can to not ride inside. And also utilize the seasons because now I don't go down to Arizona anymore and train. I live, Canada pretty well full time. So things that, well, one, what is cross training? It's basically doing something that's not your main sport. So you'll see a lot of cyclists right now at this time of the year, they'll be running. A lot of times we'll avoid running when we get closer to bike racing, because there is a lot of correlating studies that kind of show if you're running close to your race date, you are losing some top end power. So we do generally avoid running closer to our kind of main races. But yeah, it's really any sport. It's anything. And, the main real benefit is mentally, it's something fresh. It also gives us, we use different muscle groups in different ways. And I can't tell you how important that is. And even like, I think of when I was training like 30 hours a week and I was in a very involved strength and conditioning program. And I would go do something like play soccer for like 40 minutes, just fun, screw around soccer. And I like at times couldn't believe how sore I would be the next day because very much like my life was forward motion, not a lot of lateral stuff, unless I was in the gym. But then you would go do something like soccer, which is very dynamic and you're moving very kind of all over the place. And I would just be crushed. And I used to think to myself, like, I just don't get it. But again, it shows just even with all the different sports I was doing, how specific we get in our training. Any kinds of cross training can be adapted into a training plan and should be, especially again, like keeping people happy helps massively with accomplishing the training plan. If we can avoid mental burnout, we are going to have it's going to put us so much ahead of our competitors because you're going to get more out of your training because you're in a better mental state about it. And so that's really the why would we bother to add it in. And then, the bigger conversation of like, how do we add it within the training plan? It's something where everyone's going to have to work with their specific coach. But in general, for me, I generally like to give, I have a very collaborative approach to coaching. I view it as I don't want to be a dictator. I want to work collaboratively with the athletes. And again, everyone's schedule is so fluid. So a lot of times, especially in deep winter, and when I generally know, okay, I know where my clients are, I know roughly what their weather's like, and especially ones that are really close to me, I generally know what snow conditions are like. I'll put what I call like kind of like more like it's just zone based training where it's like I'm looking for 3 hours at, anywhere from zone 1 to 3, but I want an average of zone 2 by the end of whatever activity you're doing. And they can accomplish it in whatever capacity they want to the point of that. If they want to spend, say I, gave them 4 hours of simple endurance and they decide to do, I'm going to do an hour on my indoor spin bike. Then I'm going to go cross country skiing with some friends. And then I'm going to go and run another little bit of it. I mean, there is some things of like, I wouldn't want someone to go out and run 4 hours if they're not, training for an ultra marathon. That would be very crushing. So there's obviously limitations within this. But generally, how do we piece it together? A big one that I really gripped onto was ski touring. And the reason that I liked ski touring so much, and to the point of where it really helped, I think, shape me. I'm like one of my best run 10K running races. I ran like a 31-minute 10K off of just ski touring and doing some runs. No workouts, but you're basically carrying a heavy bag and you're going vertically uphill. So you're able to stay in low aerobic zones, but you build a very specific strength piece. And it can be quite useful as you, if you think of being a cyclist or whatever, like, your watts per kilogram, like, if you start going uphill with a heavy bag, very quickly you get quite functionally strong. And that's why I really like ski touring for that component. And it just has such a similarity to mountain biking of, you kind of slog up the skin track uphill and then, you kind of ski down. And you are like mountain biking, you're still utilizing as you go downhill, like other muscles and whatnot. So again, it's, that's an easy one to do many hours at low aerobic zones. And, it's one that can replace a long ride really well. Cross country skiing, I usually kind of like to, unless you're really good at it, which I'm not, I generally, my heart rate gets pretty high pretty quick because I don't have great efficiency in my skate skiing. So I try to be smart with, I don't try to go do really long cross country skis because it crushes me pretty good. A lot of people will see like Jeff Kabush is pretty, he's another pro rider that, has been to the Olympics and done everything in the mountain biking community. But he's a good example. He posts a lot about when he's in wherever in California, escaping me right now, but he does a lot of cross country skiing up Tahoe. And so you'll see him go out for really long cross country skis because personally for him, he doesn't want to go into the gym and he views as that, it's a good full body workout, which I do agree. And so it's just, again, it comes down to your skill set as well. So that's something as well to factor into your cross training as well. And how long and hard you're going to go. So think of the activity and again, talk to your coach about it and think about it. If you say you don't have a coach, track it, like wear a heart rate strap, do the activity and see what you get. And then see how it applies to some of your other sessions. Cause you might sit and say to yourself, oh, I could use this. And, cross country skiing, like you could do threshold workouts with it. Cause you're like, okay, I'll do 5 minutes hard and 2.5 minutes easy. And I'll repeat that 3 times through and boom, I don't have to do a trainer workout. Because again, like with cross training, your heart and lungs don't know the difference. And again, like there's going to be plenty of time before, a North American calendar to get yourself back on the bike and get that, specific element of training in that you do kind of need. But again, when it's November, December, January, and February, like I'm pretty happy for people to do workouts that aren't on Zwift. again, sometimes Zwift is the best option when you're just crunched for time and it's dark out or whatever. Another one there. So SNC, strength and conditioning. Um, Again, this is wildly underutilized. A lot of people, again, like majority of my clientele has about 10 hours a week to train. And generally speaking, a well-managed 10 hours a week is enough to be able to do pretty hard races like BC Bike Race. If you're, stay consistent and stay injury free, banging out 10-hour week after week with, having your set recovery periods is a super beneficial way to go about things. The important key here, when should I start? When should I stop? Don't start a strength and conditioning program right before your A races. You're just adding yourself or exposing yourself to being incredibly sore. We do want to start it with lots of time. So fall into early winter. And generally, I like to keep the movements going. As you get closer into race season, that's where I generally say pull off the weight and stay on the movements if you were keeping up with your strength and conditioning program. And generally speaking, 2 times a week is plenty. And again, it doesn't need to be some drawn out 2 hour strength and conditioning session. Like 30 to 40 minutes. Take good rest and really avoid circuit-based training. I generally believe have lifting be lifting, have the movement be the movement, take good recovery between, because we're not at this point, we're not charging or chasing any functional strength here. We're looking for just pure strength. So, we want to start small with our weights, but we also, we want to progress to lifting heavy, but not high reps. We want to, kind of anywhere in that eight to 10 reps is good. You can, if you really know what you're doing with your strength and conditioning, or you have a personal trainer, you might even go through a few blocks where you're kind of doing sets where you're like lifting really heavy and only doing 3 to 4 to 5 reps. But again, like I would say, if you're going that way, you should really know that your form's rock solid. Because as you're lifting that kind of heavy weight, where, again, if your form is bad, the heavier the weight is on you, you're going to find out a lot sooner how much that can be a problem in terms of an injury. So that's the big thing. If you're sitting here listening to this recording and think to yourself, like, I don't know if I really squat properly with good form or whatever, like it might be worthwhile just hiring a personal trainer for a day even, and then, then to give you some tips or whatever, and then maybe work out a bunch yourself and go back to them and be like, am I still lifting under good form? Because again, even like, I've been a part of many different strength and conditioning programs through my time of being on national team. And, every new person that you'd work with would give you a little bit of different feedback. I've worked with 3 different strength and conditioning coaches, and they all had a very different approach to it. And all of it made sense to me. They all had their theory and stuff. And, now I kind of group what all 3 of them had done and kind of morph it into my plan that I kind of have now. So how will strength and conditioning help in endurance sport? I kind of touched on it quick as the slide came on. So if we're talking about most people have about 10 hours a week to train, we need to avoid injury. And strength and conditioning is that opportunity to basically build up the body's resilience to soft tissue injuries. So, muscles is the muscle that we have is our armor. It also helps when you crash on a bike. I believe the more you focus on your strength and conditioning, when you do have bad crashes, you generally see athletes bounce back a lot better. Hence, you'll see some professional athletes have these horrific crashes that if you saw any other normal person have that issue, they might not ever walk again. But that professional athlete was able to actually, kind of get back to sport not that long after it. So Obviously, that's a massive component to it. I think it's number one on why you would do it is that if you can do more 10-hour weeks because you're not having injury, and especially if we take like for runners, um, it's even larger because running is high impact. Generally, biking is lower impact. But it shows up in biking. Like lower back pain is probably the one most complained about thing at BC bike races. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, I feel like my back is broken." By having a targeted strength and conditioning program, nailing things like squats and RDLs and all that kind of stuff, you'll notice in a stage race how you're like, wow, actually, I feel pretty good, and I'm climbing up the hill and can generate power. So those are massive components to why we would do S&C. And probably last point I'd make there and how it helps endurance sport is, again, that idea of just raw functional power, which you need, like technical sections of mountain biking or trail running or, any kind of thing that you're doing, any kind of real technical element or strength-based element has massive benefit to having a good strength and conditioning program because it's going to be able to keep your heart rate lower. On certain climbs where it gets super steep and you just have to mash, if you're stronger, you're going to have your heart rate lower than the person that just doesn't have as much strength. So that's the real importance of a really good strength and conditioning program there. So that's really the main chunk of everything. And so, yeah, that's kind of, again, an overview of kind of some things for the month of December into kind of that January, like things that we should be kind of thinking about. Again, generally speaking, you should have your goals dialed. If we're racing in a North American calendar, your goals should actually be pretty well squared away in November. And you should kind of been cracking on in November. And if you're kind of listening to this and you think to yourself, like, I haven't really started, just get on it now. The main thing I would say is have a good block of training with like knowing what you want out of the year, especially before Christmas, because, there's 6 or so days in Christmas that's gonna, no one knows what day or time it is, and you're eating like lots of cookies and whatever. And, generally speaking, I want any of my clients to take that time to be with family and to enjoy. And, if you get exercise in those days, great. If you don't, because you're busy visiting family, that's okay. Or you're doing something completely different. Like maybe you're just going to the resort and skiing. Like that's great. The main thing is, can we get a good 3-week block in before Christmas craziness comes? And then can we get right back to work? And, obviously for a few weeks, you got to deal with all the resolutioners at the gyms and whatever, but they kind of go away again pretty quick. So that's the thing. If you're listening to this, I challenge you to kind of get cracking with it. And as well to start implementing some of these other things. So if you're not doing a strength and conditioning program, maybe reach out and ask me, what could I do? What does a strength and conditioning program look like? Or maybe it's me helping build a plan. And then the visualization part of things, that's something to start implementing. Like, what is your goal? And, when you're on a boring trainer ride where, you can watch Netflix, which personally I can't focus enough to watch Netflix. So I think it's a good time to focus instead my energy into rehearsal of race. So yeah, I hope everyone's going to find this useful. And yeah, again, for all the people that will watch this recording, apologies for the mess up of the link. Because yeah, obviously there was a lot more people signed up and didn't get an opportunity to get the correct link. So I will kind of email this whole thing out. But yeah, thanks again, everyone. And we'll have another one come January on the 3rd. So it will be another great check-in. I haven't fully ironed out what topic that will be. But we'll have it kind of hopefully an email just before Christmas, so everyone can kind of plan accordingly. But yeah, thanks again, and look forward to having more of these.